What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Providence Perspective. I'm Jay, the Reformed Rican Dude. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I was thinking, guys, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I'm a huge proponent, well, maybe not huge, but a big proponent of the idea of having a Christian nation. And as it turns out, lo and behold, not every Christian necessarily agrees with not necessarily the idea per se, but the terminology, I guess. So I kind of figured let's have a guy that could probably clarify what he means, right? I'm sure he doesn't represent absolutely everybody, but what he means by saying that he doesn't necessarily agree or believe in the concept of a Christian nation. So I want to go ahead and welcome Sean DeMars. How's it going, Sean?
Oh, it's good, brother. I'm so thankful to be on your show, but it just hit me while you were doing the introduction. You have the coolest podcast setup ever, and I'm sitting on my couch with a laptop. I hope this doesn't the juxtaposition isn't too jarring for your fans.
No.
Okay.
I'm barely getting by. I mean, I tried to spruce it up a little bit.
It looks nice, bro.
But well, thank you. I mean, I do feel like I've seen some guys that really just have a fantastic setup. Like, I'm really jealous of Wes Huff, actually. Like his setup, he looks like, he's smart. Like not just from like listening to him, but just like his setup, just fantastic. I wish I had half the books that he has. I wish I had read half the books he read, actually.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm sure that many people probably do know who you are, but in case they don't, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I grew up in a non-Christian home. I was a drug addict and a drug dealer and a gangbanger when I got saved at the age of 18 out of a life of drugs and crime. And I pretty quickly got involved in the prosperity gospel. After that, I didn't know any better, and I became kind of the poster boy for the prosperity gospel. And then through a series of God's kind providences, I was led out of that. I spent about 5 years in the military as a combat medic. And then I spent about 4 years in the Amazon jungle as a missionary. And then I spent a year trying to be a Presbyterian. And then because the Lord is kind, that didn't work out. And then I came back and did a church revitalization in Alabama. I've been here for about 8 years. I'm a pastor, father, husband, CrossFitter, jiu-jitsu black belt. And I have two podcasts. One is called Defend and Confirm. That's the more polemical stuff where, we're attacking critical theory and church planting movements and theonomy. And then I have Room for Nuance, which is the more Catholic side of my personality, where I'm trying to be less polemical, more ironic, trying to build the unity of the church by having conversations, often with people that I disagree with. And so I think that's it. That's me, man. And now I'm just here on your show, and I really do hope that it's just a blessing for whoever tunes in, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate your time as well. We definitely, we agree on the essentials and even on a lot of secondary things.
Yeah.
You mentioned theonomy.
Cessationism, complementarianism, Calvinism, right? I mean,
we're there with complementarianism. I think functionally we would agree.
Okay.
I do ascribe to biblical patriarchy, but what I've told people is like there's like an extreme side to biblical patriarchy, and like that's not, like my wife can't read a book unless I allow, like that's not what I'm talking about when I say biblical patriarchy.
Yeah.
I think functionally there's a lot more similarity between the more conservative side of complementarianism and the kind of biblical patriarchy that I ascribe to.
I think it comes down to some semantics. I'm a thick complementarian. I just have quibbles with the usage of the term patriarchy. But again, like if you and I sat down and said, what does this look like in the home and in society and in the church? I think we'd be basically lined up.
Yes, we'd be at least 80, 90%, if not more so.
Which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But hey, let's not be too buddy because people are here for a fight. Okay. So
dude, I'm ready.
we gotta argue about something.
Okay,
so
let's do it.
Christian nation. So the way that this came up was, I think you posted something on social media saying that there's no such thing as Christian nation. So, why don't you just kind of flesh that out and tell me why you don't think that's a thing?
Yeah. So I do think there is such a thing as a Christian nation, and I think it's the church. I understand in First Peter when it talks about us being called a holy nation, a chosen race, a royal priesthood, to refer to the church. And I understand that the church has passports, which is church membership. We have sovereign soil, which is wherever the church is gathered. That's where the flag of heaven is planted. But I understand us to always be a nation, a heavenly nation within earthly secular nations. So I understand that in some sense, when people refer to a Christian nation, what they mean is a nation that has been informed by a Christian worldview. If that's what someone means by Christian nation, then I think that is possible. If, however, what they mean is a nation that is in any sense ontologically Christian, that is at its very nature, like at the core of what it is as a nation, ontologically, I just don't think the Bible has a category for that outside of the church. Now, to be clear of what I don't mean, I'm not a Mennonite. I'm not someone who thinks that Christians should retract themselves from the public square. I think we should seek to have godly influence in our various spheres of life where the Lord has providentially placed us, which includes politics, and we should bring our Christian worldview to bear in the public square insofar as we have opportunity. And I'm also exceedingly grateful to live in a country that has been so shaped and formed by a Christian worldview. And that's largely owing to the Bible's influence. And I lament the fact that I think that that's coming to an end, probably within my lifetime or the lifetime of my children, because it brings a great many blessings. Nevertheless, I would also say that's probably historically the exception that proves the rule. Now, I just said a lot, so I'm ready for you to grab a hold of something there and we'll dig in.
No worries. I guess, by the way, I apologize. I dropped something. I don't know what I dropped.
Oh, I didn't even notice. I was just, I was in my own head, bro.
No worries. Well, if you guys watching heard something, my apologies. I guess I'll find it later. I have no idea what I just dropped. But I guess to steelman your position a little bit, what you are saying is because of passages like in First Peter, where First Peter 2, where it says you are a holy nation, a royal priesthood. You're essentially saying the only nation that can be a Christian nation is the Christian, I guess, the kingdom of God, right?
That's right.
Is what you would be saying.
That's
You're
right.
not saying that there cannot be nations who have been heavily influenced by Christianity. Correct. And in some sense, right, like people can use that and say, well, that's a Christian nation. But you're saying, but no, truly a Christian nation is made up of solely Christians, and there's only one nation like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, excuse me. I guess my question would be, do you use the term Christian nation in the latter sense of the term, right? The way that you defined it in any scenario whatsoever. What I mean by that is, when we're talking about like people who say, Uganda is a Christian nation because their constitution says that it's a Christian nation. Would you use that colloquially in any sense? Another beautiful day. Hey, I'm glad you're here. You listen to Providence Perspective because you believe Christ is king, not just over your soul, but over everything, including your finances. That's why Dominion Wealth Strategists exists, to help Christian families take dominion, build wealth, and advance God's kingdom. Whether it's budgeting, debt management, retirement planning, or estate planning, Dominion Wealth equips you with the strategies to reduce your donation to Caesar and maximize your gift to God. This isn't just about mere financial stability. It's about building a legacy that advances Christ's reign on earth. As independent agents, Dominion Wealth works for you, leveraging the best tools and services to help you build, protect, and pass on wealth, all for God's glory. The future belongs to Christ and His people. Start building the capital that you and your children will boldly deploy. Book your free consultation at www.reformed.money and take dominion over your finances. From baptism to burial, Dominion's got you covered. Once again, that's www.reformed.money to book a complimentary consultation today. And tell them Jay from Providence Perspective sent you.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I'm about to talk out of both sides of my mouth, so bear with
Okay,
me. On
no
the one
problem.
hand, as a pastor, you're a pastor too, right?
I am not. I mean, I teach several classes in my church, but
Okay.
no
Sorry,
priest.
when you were talking about people coming to your church earlier before we started. Anyways, I very frequently deal with people who I have to listen to them and try to understand what they mean to be saying, and then that's the way I'm going to interact with them. So, for example, if someone says, you know, our church burned down, our building burned down about a year and a half, 2 years ago. When they
Okay.
say our church burned down, I don't say, hey, well, let me stop you right there. Actually, the church is the gathered saints. What you're
Mhm.
referring to is the building where the church gathers. No, I
Sure.
know what they mean when they say that. So, in one sense, I want to be accommodating to certain Christians when they say Christian nation. I understand what they mean, and I'm not going to pick a fight with them over it. On the other hand, in certain conversations where I feel like there's more at stake, I don't want to do that because words do matter, and I want to protect certain definitions. And I never want to use uh, the word Christian as a modifier for the word nation in such a way that confuses what the word Christian means. So it really just kind of depends on what room I'm in.
Okay. All right. So I guess my follow-up question would then be, do you say, hey, this school over here is a Christian school, or this, we have here in South Florida is where I live. We have Baptist Health, like it's a
Uh huh.
hospital. I would say, well, that's technically a Christian hospital. I don't know if every individual that works there is a Christian. Probably not.
Yeah.
but but I would say, but yes, in terms of its establishment and its purpose, it is a Christian hospital. Would
Yeah.
you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would sympathize with it, and I'm not really trying to play soft here. I promise,
No, that's
but
fine. That's fine.
I think when it comes to the mixture of the keys and the sword, right? The keys representing the authority of the church, the sword representing the authority of the state, or even the rod representing the authority of the home. I think that to confuse categories there is so much more dangerous that I really want to. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to try to make sure that we're keeping our definition straight. Whereas something like a school, I actually still wouldn't use that language, but I understand what people mean, and I'm much more sympathetic to them speaking like that. They're trying to say this is a school that's influenced by biblical principles and ethics and a Christian worldview, and we're going to try to teach our children from that worldview, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think I'm much more lax on people talking like that in reference to a school as opposed to a nation.
Um, what about school versus hospital? Would you make that distinction as well, or
Yeah, I think it would be in the same category for me.
okay? So
When if you just picture the three different spheres of authority that God has placed, those are the ones that I'm really zealous to protect. Like I don't
okay,
want there to be any kind of confusion about state, home, state, family, church. But like school, hospital, bowling alley, I mean, it's a
sure.
Christian bowling alley. The owner's a Christian. He does all the business according to it's a Christian ethics. He's trying to evangelize people there. He wants to call it a Christian bowling alley. Whatever.
Okay. So, I guess what I want to know is why would you be more flex with that with businesses or schools or whatever, but not so much the idea of a nation being Christian?
Yeah, because of what I just said. I'm zealous to protect these spheres of authorities, and I think so much can go wrong when you confuse them and conflate them. Uh, Insert 1,000 years of medieval Roman Catholicism, emperors appointing popes and popes appointing emperors and mutual
Sure.
excommunications and all the stuff, early American settlement confusion. I mean, I think just nothing but bad stuff can happen when you confuse those things. I think less bad things can happen when you confuse categories in reference to like a bowling alley or a hospital.
Okay. So I guess my follow-up question to that, I'm going to have a lot of follow-up questions.
All
Uh,
right,
I just realized I'm going to have a bunch of follow-up questions. So
great.
if you have, say, Christian leadership, right? You have a nation where at least they act and proclaim to be Christian, right? At least, if not most, all, if not most, right, of the leadership in the nation acts and proclaims Christianity, and you have a population that is predominantly Christian with traditions and holidays and all of that stuff. I understand what you're saying about sphere sovereignty, right? You're talking about separation of church and state. I believe that's what you're referring to, correct?
That's certainly part of it. Yes.
Okay. So I I guess, well, let me not say what I believe, but let me ask you this. Would you be a little bit more comfortable, or at least would you be able to yield the term Christian nation to a particular nation like that?
Yeah, people bring up examples like this of like Uganda, or what was the one recently that celebrated a big anniversary, like so many centuries of being a Christian
I'm
nation.
not
I think it was
sure
like,
if it's Poland or Hungary or something like
yeah,
that.
Hungary, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, no, I wouldn't want to do that. I would say most often, such a nation is full of nominalism, and at the very heart of what Christianity is, most of the time these nations are working actively against that. When I say what is a Christian and what is Christianity, at the fundamental ontological level, what do these words mean? What do they convey? What's their telos? I just want to say a nation full of nominal Christian leaders and nominal Christian people, though they are downstream from a Christian worldview, is so antithetical to what Christianity actually is that I actually feel more pressure to not confuse those two categories. And I'm going to push back even harder.
Okay. So can you give me an example of, like, I think you said that they actually work against the idea of Christianity. I don't want to misquote you, but if
Yeah.
I understood correctly, you said that they actually work against that more. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So it's an interesting trade off. So I live in the Christian South. Where are you located, brother?
South Florida. Yeah,
Okay. Now, do you notice what I
Miami.
just said there? I said Christian South, huh?
Yeah, that's
Freudian
true.
slip for the win, but that's what people call it. They call it the Christian South, the Bible Belt. I don't know exactly how it is in Florida, but I'm in North Alabama. I'm the buckle
Listen,
of the Bible Belt.
the further you go south in Florida, the more north you get. Let's just
Okay.
put it that way.
Yeah, that's a trip. So the advantage is that there is a thin veneer of Christian morality, which means that things like drag queen story hour aren't really happening. It's just you're not going to get a lot of that. You're going to get a lot of politeness, a lot of good things in society, but they're very superficial. But underneath that is all kinds of confusion about what the gospel is, who Christ is, what Christianity is, and it inoculates people to true Christianity. It's they get just enough of what they think Christianity is to just let them live their whole lives really without coming to reckon with the gospel that can actually save them. And I think it's been very, very damaging to the South. Do I want to live in Portland? Of course Portland, Oregon, by the way, or Portland, Maine, for that matter. I don't want to live in either of the Portlands on either coast. But I will say that there's no confusion in Portland about what a Christian is or what Christianity is. You pretty quickly you know where you stand, you know where the gospel stands. The lines of demarcation are clear. But uh you don't have that thin veneer of Christian morality. And so there are many things about that place. And I shouldn't say thin veneer only. You even lack some of the deeper things that you get from a Christian worldview, which makes it a tougher place to live and there's less common grace there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the fact that there's a predominantly Christian culture in that area where you live in, Bible Belt, makes it, I guess, Would you say that people's hearts are hardened to the possibility that they might not actually be a Christian because they kind of live that culture? So they're like, I don't, I already am a Christian. I don't need to be. Is that what you're saying, or am I
Yeah,
missing
what
the
I'm
mark?
saying is where Christianity is assumed, people are inoculated against the gospel.
Okay, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm understanding, right?
Yeah.
Like, sounds like
Now,
you're saying, well,
if you extrapolate out that out to an entire country, where it's just assumed that to be a part of this country, in the case of England during from this year to this year, that's you're baptized into the official state church or a lesser version of that. It doesn't matter. I think it does the same kind of thing.
okay, okay, I gotcha. So I guess then I would have to ask this. Living in South Florida, um, you have a lot of Roman Catholicism here,
Mhm.
uh, Jehovah's Witnesses, quite a bit as well. Some charismatics, well, a lot of charismatic stuff.
Yeah,
But
and the charismatic stuff and the Roman Catholic stuff sometimes go hand in hand, right?
sometimes it's really interesting.
Yeah,
Actually, you have a lot of Cubans here also. So you have
yeah,
like Santeria, which is basically a combination of Roman Catholicism
and
and
like
like Western
witchcraft.
African. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like
yeah,
Western African religion. And it's very strange.
yeah.
Um, but the one thing that you have here a lot of, um, well, let me give you a little bit of context because I don't know if you know, uh, our our county, Miami-Dade County, went red this last election for the first time in I don't even know how long.
Yeah.
And most people, when they think about like Cubans, right, they're very conservative and they tend to vote red because they hate communism, right? So they don't like the Democrats. So we went red for the first time, and a lot of people were surprised at that because they were like, "Oh, really? Like, I thought there was so many Cubans there that Miami-Dade County was always red." Well, as a matter of fact, no, we have more than just Cubans here, right? Like we have a lot of like LGBTQ in the Miami Beach sort of area. You have a lot of Haitian population that votes predominantly Democrat and African American as well, and so different things, different groups that are here beyond the Cubans. Um, but what's interesting about both sides, whether Democrat or Republican, is that ultimately Christianity isn't tied to a political party. I'm just saying that tends to be more conservative. But what's interesting about both sides is that above Roman Catholicism, above Jehovah's Witness, above all that stuff, is actually sort of an indifference towards the things of God, right? Uh, you could maybe put it as agnostic. They would say, "Yeah, I kind of guess I believe in a higher power. I don't really care. I'm sure there's something out there watching out for me, or maybe something created me, but it doesn't really matter." Or they might take it as far as, "Yeah, I'm just not. I'm not a believer." And the reason why I'm saying all this is because, as you say that you see a hardening in your context, I see a hardening in my context as well. And it's because they have become so desensitized to their own sins and to their, sort of depravity. I guess not sort of, but exactly that, their depravity. When they hear the gospel message, it's sort of a very much an indifference to it. Whereas when you're in a society that people have these standards, these moral standards, and they come face to face with, um, I guess you could say like what's socially acceptable versus not socially acceptable. If sin is not socially acceptable, I think people are going to have a pretty easy time figuring out, wow, I'm not as good as I think I am. But if it's acceptable, then I believe that people are become more and more hardened. The reason why I believe all that is because of Romans 1, right? I do believe that a lot of people here in my context have been given over to the point where like they're just not taking in the gospel. So my question, I'm sorry I made this very long, but it's to set up the question.
Okay.
Would you agree that to some extent it would be harder to preach the gospel to a people that do not even accept your argument that they're in sin?
Um, I think there are trade-offs. Uh, when you're preaching the gospel, as I have in many very darkly secular areas, the trade-off is that there aren't these anchor points. There's not shared definitions. When I go to talk about Jesus and sin and God and salvation, if I'm in the Bible Belt versus downtown Seattle open air preaching, which I've done before, you're going to get, at least with someone, a recognition of some of the words that you're using. You don't have to kind of explain your lexicon. So in some sense, I understand that it'll be more difficult, but there's another sense in which I want to say that that familiarity can actually work against you in a way that I think is more difficult for sharing the gospel, because people think that they understand. Right. Maybe they can even explain things to you because they did Awanas when they were a kid, and they went to First Baptist Church, and they were in the Wednesday nights and the Sunday nights and all this stuff. But that has only hardened their hearts even more to the gospel because they think they know it. I think an interesting example of this is actually in the Bible, when Jesus comes and then his apostles afterwards go out and they preach the gospel to the Jews and to the Gentiles. With the Jews, there are certain anchor points. Paul is able to reason with the Bereans from the scriptures that Christ is Lord. And praise God, they search the scriptures and they find that he is Christ the Lord. But more often than not, what Christ encounters is the hardness of heart from the Jews, who think they already know it all because they've been exposed to it. And then when the gospel goes out to the Gentiles, though there's a lot more groundwork that has to be done, there is a different kind of openness and receptivity once that groundwork has been accomplished. So I don't want to try to quantify like exactly which one is harder, but I want to lean into, I think it's probably more difficult in a burned over district. That's what they called like Upper New York after the Second Great Awakening. That's what I kind of think about the Bible Belt as. It's the burnt over district. But I also want to say one more thing, and now thank you for bearing with me as I ramble, brother.
No problem.
I feel like we're at a point in this conversation where we're kind of arguing from the fringes a little bit. Like we're talking about the downstream effects of what happens in a nation, and then we're getting back to like the Christian nation thing. So, even if I were to concede this point to you that like it is more difficult in that context, I don't know that it would fundamentally change my argument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I do understand where you're coming from,
Okay.
but like I said, I'm going to not just push back, but kind of also show you where I'm coming from and why I have
Yeah.
the position that I
Well, let me
have. Right.
encourage you, brother. You're doing a very good job of, you know, in this trying to, ask good leading questions, share your opinion, but letting me, the guest on the show, do the majority of the talking. I know it's a tricky balance, but I think you're nailing it.
Yeah, I do talk a lot though, so
You've done
I
pretty good
can
so far.
I can go off in tangents, but I appreciate that very
I'll put
much.
on the wrap it up. Do you remember that from the Chappelle show? If you go on too long of a rant, I'll pull out the
Okay.
wrap it up button.
I do remember that was very inappropriate, but it was funny, I have
Yeah.
to admit. My not so holy days.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank God for his grace.
Amen.
All right. So let me see. So I had something here that I wanted to I
I
got
threw you off,
distracted with
man.
this.
I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. We're fine. We're fine. But I did have something that I wanted to mention, and I had made a note of it here as you were speaking earlier. Let me see. Okay. All right. So I guess this is what I was thinking about earlier, right? Like this is what I wrote. All right. In nations where laws have historically been shaped by Christian moral teachings, such as those prohibiting certain behaviors based on biblical principles, doesn't that suggest a Christian, not a nation per se, but a Christian national identity, given the fact that, hey, there was enough Christian influence there that such laws sort of came from the Christian worldview? Would you
That's
would you
an
agree with
that
that much?
that's an interesting question, brother, because the word identity can function in two ways. It can be a Romans 6 kind of thing where Paul says, you have been baptized with Christ. You're dead to sin, right? You're no longer a slave to sin. That's the second half of Romans 6. But you're a slave to Christ. And that's this objective, uh, heavenly ordained identity. It's just it's who you are. Again, it's ontology. But identity can also be something that one assumes for themselves, which we see in this current transgender madness. I mean, it's just as crazy as it gets. And it can be something that is bestowed on you from outside of yourself. So you grew up in an abusive home and your dad called you all kinds of bad names when you were growing up. You assume that identity. So with the way that I would parse that out is I would just say objectively, that nation does not have a Christian identity. God looking down from heaven does not see that nation with its president or its chancellor or its whatever and say, this is Christian. Because the only thing that can be Christian, I think, according to the New Testament, is a nation of people composed of regenerate persons, which I understand to be the church. But could a nation assume that identity for itself, or could someone in some meaningful way impose that identity on it? Sure, I have a category for that. But I have a category for it, but I'm always going to push against it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I thought of Psalm 33, what was it? 33:12. It says, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his inheritance." Would you say that that's specifically talking about the Christian nation as you defined it in the beginning?
Yeah, that's that's a little tricky. So I think it's probably almost certainly talking about the nation of Israel in the when that was written. But I think that it's pointing forward typologically to the church. So I would say that other than the church, the only other truly Christian nation that's ever existed, and Christian is it's reading something back onto it historically, but I think you know what I mean. It would be the nation of Israel,
Sure.
the nation that belongs to Yahweh. But I understand the nation of Israel to be an ethnic, political, and spiritual people all bound up in one. But then I understand the political and the ethnic aspects to fall away in the new covenant and for the spiritual thing to only be that which continues.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I gotcha. I know that we can, that can lead to a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah, because are you Presbyterian?
No, I am not. But I was going to ask you,
Okay.
what do you think I am actually?
Yeah, I mean, are you 1689? Are you a Reformed Baptist guy?
Yeah.
Dude, the beard.
1689.
I didn't I didn't even have to read anything. I just saw the beard and you're Puerto Rican and I just put the pieces together.
Okay, so here's the thing. Like, some Reformed Baptists think I'm Presbyterian. Presbyterians think I'm Reformed Baptist. So I think I land theologically somewhere in the middle. I mean,
Okay.
ultimately, if you tell me like, "Hey, are your children baptized as infants?" I would say absolutely not.
Right.
So that's where I end up. And church polity, I do agree with a more congregationalist type of church polity.
Yeah.
So that ultimately I land in that camp, 1689. But yeah, I understand. I understand the confusion in terms of like how most people react to what they think I am.
Yeah.
I don't understand the confusion in what I ultimately believe, but I guess I can be confusing.
You understand you for sure.
Somewhat, yeah. I
Yeah.
do understand myself, but I think I don't even understand myself sometimes because I'm like
Yeah.
people are seeing something else,
Yeah.
so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so let me ask you this:
Okay.
going back to the issue of sphere sovereignty, that kind of idea, and government's role and things like that. Would you agree with the Romans 13 understanding that the government, the state, whatever you want to call it, is a servant of God ultimately?
Yeah, it's a deacon of God.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you would not say, however, even if well, actually, before I even ask that, would you
Okay.
say that governments need to be secular?
Need to be. I would just say there's no other option.
Okay.
I would say
So,
because can I
Mhm.
give you the why behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I understand the covenant, the Noahic covenant, to be the divine principle which establishes the Romans 13 diaconate of the state. And I understand that is a covenant that God makes with all of the nations of the earth, according to the reciprocity principle elucidated in that text. So there are like two covenants in the scriptures that are for all of creation, maybe three. It depends on how you read the Noahic covenant. And then there are special covenants with God's people. But I understand Romans 13 and Genesis. Did I say 6? I meant 9 to be connected.
Okay, I gotcha. So this is where I'm having a hard time, right? And I'm just being honest.
Yeah, great.
Because secularism, in my mind, implies some kind of neutrality,
Mm.
right?
But there is no such thing as neutrality.
Right, exactly. Jesus
Yeah.
said, "Whoever is not with me is against me." Right? He came to bring not peace but a sword. Right? Like there's this like, hey, you're either you're on this side or you're on that side.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that applies to all things. So my question would then be, if you have a government that is secular, quote unquote,
Yeah.
but it is doing its godly duty, I guess you could say, as a servant, a deacon of God,
Mm-hmm.
right, and doing justice according to biblical principles. Why wouldn't you say that government, at least in some sense, is a Christian government?
So I would say all governments are the deacon of God. So Paul, when he's speaking about the use of the sword in Romans 13, the first government that fills the frame of his mind is the oppressive government of Rome. The government that's had its boot heel on the neck of the Jews, his kinsmen, his people, and then during his lifetime, the church. During his ministry, the church. That's the government that is going to first enter. When he says the government is the deacon of God and it brings the sword to punish evil and reward good, he's thinking of Rome, Nero, and so on and so forth. So that gives me the category of corrupt governments still carrying out this diaconal service for the Lord, whether they realize that's what they're doing or not. This kind of gets into the natural law conversation, because if their job is to punish evil and reward good, then how do you know what's evil and what's good? This is the pretty classic theonomic argument, and man, it is rhetorically powerful. I mean, it's really good. The by what standard, and I
That's
get that.
presuppositional, though.
Yeah.
But it's tied. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a precept guy. I'm all over it, but I'm saying like the theonomy guys have taken that and they've used it really well. I'm not hating on them. They've used it really well. But I would just say I never expect a secular government like Rome to search the scriptures to figure out how to bear the sword. I think they're doing general moral reasoning according to natural revelation and the human conscience, which is why it's so often done poorly and why governments are so often corrupt. And I see that as kind of assumed and built into the very fabric of fallen authority on the face of the earth until Jesus comes back, which is why I rejoice whenever a Christian worldview does gain ground in a particular culture, and then it drips down into the politics, and a nation's laws and customs are more in line with what the Bible reveals as ethically good, true, and beautiful.
Okay, that's fair. So that actually leads me to, and I know we're running out of time here, so I want to be respectful of that as well.
Thanks,
But
man. I was having a great time though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe we can talk about something else in
Sure.
the future if
Sure.
we have
Yeah.
time. So I'll be more than happy to speak with you again. But I do want to kind of get into, I one of the things that I do try to do. I'm part of the Truth and Love Network. Actually, Keith Foskey's in it as well.
Okay.
A couple other guys you might know. I don't know if you know Claude Ramsey. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But one of the things that we try to do is to have ecumenism, I guess you could say, but within the boundaries of Orthodox Christianity, right? So you're not going to see a full preterist or something like that in
Right.
that group,
No heresy.
right? Right, or a prosperity gospel or something like that.
Right.
But we have guys of different perspectives, and I've noticed that sometimes we might differ on the terminology, but we do want a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
So is there something that you can think of that when you meet a typical guy like me or whoever, right, that says,
Yeah.
I want a Christian nation,
Yeah.
where would you say, okay, this is where we do agree?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. It works towards unity, which we need more of these
Yeah,
days. Dude,
I
Christians are
agree.
out here trying to decapitate each other on social media. It's crazy. It's like we have everything in common, but we're gonna rip each other to shreds over this.
Guilty sometimes. Guilty sometimes.
Same. So yeah, where I am very sympathetic to the Christian nationalist or the theonomy guy is his desire to bring God's word to bear on all of life, right? The Moscow thing is all of Christ for all of life. I want to claim that too. I don't want to. I'm a non-theonomist, and I want to say that too. Just the way that we apply that is differently. It is different, and I also want to just sympathize with people who say, "I see society collapsing into moral decay around me, and I loathe it, and I don't want that to happen." But also, what I want to say to that brother is or sister is in the midst of that, I don't want you. Now, remember, I'm coming at this from my perspective, as a pretty historic Baptist view of church and state. What I don't want you to do is to try to baptize some political philosophy, and for you to feel good about now trying to take the nation back or fight back against wokeness, which we need to fight against for sure. But then just feeling kind of empowered to be a culture warrior because you found theological grounding to do so in theonomy or in some of the Christian nationalist arguments. Now, let me be clear, because I know how things go on the internet. I'm not saying that's what everyone is doing.
Right.
I'm just saying I have seen that.
Right.
And I know the temptation is there. So I just want to say, let's all be careful of that. I understand most of the people who hold their views are doing so thoughtfully and scripturally, and they're studying church history, and we've just arrived at different conclusions. But there is a segment that I see that is doing that, and I think it's really unhelpful.
Yeah. When it comes to that, I actually absolutely 100% agree, right? Because one of the things that I do speak out against is against those fringe sort of right at the borderlands sort of guys where it's like, you have abandoned the gospel.
Yeah.
It's like we have to fight, like you were saying, we have to fight against all this stuff. But ultimately, our fight is a spiritual fight, right?
Yeah.
Now, it affects the world around us, but you got to
Right.
take the gospel with it, right? If there is no gospel, then, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. I really don't, which is absolutely central. So I appreciate that you said that, and I know you're fair. Like I've seen your interview with Doug Wilson and the rest of the Moscow guys, and so that's one of the things I do appreciate about you, that you do have very strong views on theonomy and things like that, which I don't agree with. We know that already.
Yeah.
But you are always gracious. And for that, I do appreciate you.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm a recovering hardcore fundamentalist. If it wasn't for God's grace, I'd just be in a boat by myself, mad at everyone for getting things wrong. But the Lord's been very kind. I've seen this role modeled by other godly leaders who, it's really interesting when you grow up and be kind of being discipled by stuff on the internet. It can really mess you up, man. But then, like, when you're actually discipled by someone and you see them hold the convictions of the gospel and many secondary matters as well, staunchly, not budging an inch, while at the same time being very Catholic in spirit, to other blood-bought believers who are pretty wrong on some pretty important things. Just seeing that in person really helps, So I just pray that a lot of the people, maybe even who are watching these videos, that they'll spend less time paying attention. I know for both of us who have a podcast, this is a crazy thing to say, but I hope that they'll spend less time paying attention to talking heads on the internet, and they'll be more involved with faithful men in their local church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The way that I've described it here before is I've said, use this as a supplemental thing, but get connected with a local church. And in fact, I've had people, and if you're watching, you know who you are, where I've said, hey, they tell me, hey, thank you so much for explaining this or explaining that. I'm like, listen, that's great. Are you in a local church? You know what I mean? Like, are you submitting to elders? I do understand some people say, hey, in my area, there is no such thing. And okay, that's fine. As much as you can get like good sound theology from podcasts and things, praise God for that. but always keep in mind, like, hey, I need to be with God's people physically, submitting to my elders. So definitely appreciate that. So, brother, I mean, we'll wrap it up here. Is there anything that you want to leave us with?
No, man, I'm just encouraged by you. This has been a really good interview. And I wouldn't flatter you, by the way. I really mean that. It's been, sometimes when you get asked to do things like this, you never know what you're walking into. But this is definitely for other people who are thinking about starting ministries like this. This is the right way to do it. When I had Doug Wilson, like you said, on Room for Nuance, I didn't hack him to death with objections. I was just like, this is his chance to express his views. I'm here to facilitate discussion, and you've done that really well. So I would just pray that the Lord continues to bless your work, brother.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you as well. Guys, if you haven't watched like American Gospel, Sean is in it. It's a fantastic movie. Go watch it. I mean, even if you already know it's always good to hear the gospel, and the way that the movie presents it, it's just fantastic. So, but I do want to say before we wrap up, the way that you were wrapping it up there sounds like I had you a little bit nervous. So I apologize if I did.
No. No, it's not you. It's the nature of the internet.
Sure. I get you. Yeah. So, but hey, brother, I appreciate your time, and just God bless you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And for you guys watching at home, I hope this was helpful. I hope that this has been a blessing to you. If you did like the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you didn't, you can leave right now. No problem. Nothing needs to be done. Okay. But if you do like this video and you've been watching my content, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be more than happy to have you as one of my subscribers. We're almost at 1,000, which I think is pretty cool. I'm not like here to try to gain a following or whatever, but I'm like, since we're almost there, let's just make it. And that way we can say, hey, we did it. And I'll be like, thank you guys. I have nothing to give you, but thank you very much. So guys, I hope this was a blessing to you. Until next time, God bless. Take care.